Hello, my name is Adam Watt, and I am Professor of French and Comparative Literature here in the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures at the University of Exeter. I want to talk about research, and if I were to try and define the research that goes on in our department, it would be quite difficult because there's so much of it. So the watchwords really are breadth, excellence, of course, and diversity. In modern languages and cultures, we have colleagues who research in 7 languages and across a huge chronological span from medieval to ultra-contemporary. We have colleagues who work in linguistics, in literature, in history, cultural history, visual culture, film. So we have a really broad span of specialisms. And we have, as a result, this very supportive, very knowledgeable, sometimes worryingly knowledgeable community of scholars who are mutually supportive. So I am a scholar of French literature in French of the 19th and 20th centuries. So if I'm working on an article or a chapter and there's an element in it about translation or about painting, there is someone I can go to, an office door I can knock on and say, do you know, could we have a chat about this? I need some help. And that sharing of knowledge, that kind of community spirit that we have is immensely positive, and it's something that that I feel very proud of here. So the work that I do, I've said, is on French literature, and my most recent project is a massive project, a 40-chapter history. I didn't write it all myself. I've been the general editor of the Cambridge history of the novel in French. And sometimes people think that literary studies can be a bit dry. This is not the case with this project. It's the first time in 100 years that a history of novel writing in French from its beginnings to the present day has been attempted. So 100 years since there has been a comprehensive study of something that we just take for granted. Novels are part of everyday life. We read novels from our earliest age until our dotage. They often give us comfort. But the novel is a form that has evolved, has changed over the years, and studying the novel in French throughout its history has been an amazing project for me. I've read an awful lot in the last few years, and working with some of the best scholars in the world, so contributors from Australia, from Canada, the USA, from France, has been a real privilege. It's given me a very long list of books that I need to read now. But also it's allowed me to revisit things that I studied when I was a student and to kind of recalibrate my understanding. So the area that I work on personally is the work of a French novelist called Marcel Proust, who's a major contributor to the novel in the 20th century. And I was able to write a chapter on him for the history. If you've heard of Proust, and a lot more people have heard of Proust than have read him, but if you've heard of Proust, you'll know what connects this great big paving stone of a novel, Proust's Recherche du Temps Perdu, to give it its full title, with these. And if you recognize these, perhaps you have a sweet tooth. These are Petite Madeleine, a very famous French cake, a small cake that was made famous by a big novel. And the scene in Proust's novel that connects these things up is a scene about memory. Proust's narrator, as an adult, feels that he doesn't have any connection to his past, that somehow he's not been able to store up the experience that makes him who he is. He doesn't really fully understand his sense of self, of identity. And then one day he has a cup of tea, tisane, lime blossom tea, with a spoonful of Madeleine, a Madeleine that's been crumbled into it. And he has that sensory experience. And all of a sudden, his childhood comes flooding back. He's back in the moment of his childhood with his great aunt. And this experience of suddenly having an unbidden memory, what he calls a mémoire involontaire, involuntary memory, makes him realize that we store up much more of our past than we're aware of. Conscious memory is one thing, being able to recall a phone number, but involuntary memory, when we're suddenly taken back by a smell or a taste to a time that we didn't think we'd recorded, is something quite different. So I teach a module on Proust's La Recherche du Temps Perdu for the final year, and we talk about these things in our seminars, And in some ways, I try and get the students beyond the Madeleine, because this novel, as you can see from its sheer size, has an awful lot more than this little cake. The novel covers, well, it's the story of someone who wants to become a novelist and is unsure if that's going to be possible. It's the story of his life. And so if we discuss this novel, we discover a whole range of human experience under the spotlight, under the microscope of this first-person subjectivity in the novel. So the first-person narrator who takes us through his life story invites us to think about love and loss, about jealousy, about human relationships and how they work. So in the module, we talk about those things. We talk about art and aesthetics, because this is someone, remember, who wants to become a novelist. We talk about the experience of aging, the experience of growing older and trying to form a relationship with our past that lets us understand who we are in the present. So all of these sorts of topics are the sorts of things that we discuss in the module, and that reading Proust's novel and researching it as I do let us explore. What excites me about working on a canonical novelist like Proust is that it's allowed me to engage with international audiences, with international collaborators. And I have a little bit of show and tell here, which is a little bit immodest, but I have a Persian version, a Farsi copy of my introduction to Proust, and a Chinese version of my biography of Proust. And there's something rather wonderful about holding in one's hands books in languages that one can't read, but yet which are words that I wrote somewhere along the line. I've also been published in German translation. And if I move the Madeleine, I can find the Danish translation of an article I wrote about an American poet's engagement with Proust's French novel. So we have a kind of global, transnational dimension to our research, and that is exciting. When I'm working on topics relating to Proust, inevitably I talk to my students on my modules about those things. I recently wrote an article about Proust and one of his contemporaries, Paul Valéry, who's not much studied, but he figures in another module I teach, which is really popular, which allows me to explore cultural history with students in the second year. And that module is called Paris, je t'aime, Writing the City. And there we look at texts by Paul Valéry from the early 20th century. We look at also at journalistic texts. We look at paintings and photographs. We look at memoirs. We look at George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London. And we look at how different aspects of the city, its architecture, its romance, the myths of the city, how these contribute to something that people feel that they understand but never quite are able to pin down. There's a circularity then between my research and my teaching, and how these things are kind of mutually beneficial. So if you were to come and study with the University of Exeter, these are the sorts of modules that you would find in our department, and I hope very much that we'll see you soon. Thank you.